Imagine a shadow army carving out gold mines in the jungles of Africa, guarding presidents in palaces, and shipping billions of dollars in resources back to Moscow. An army that props up dictators, fuels wars, and commits atrocities, yet waves Russian flags in city streets where crowds cheer them as liberators. That army was Wagner, but Wagner are gone, or at least it's been reborn. In today's video, we're going to uncover how Russia's Wagner Group evolved into something even bigger, the so-called Africa Corps. We'll look at how mercenaries went from being Moscow's deniable hired guns to a direct arm of the Kremlin's foreign policy, how African gold and diamonds are financing the war in Ukraine, and what it means for the future of the continent and the world. Russia's love affair with African battlefields isn't new. Back in the Soviet era, Moscow armed liberation movements from Angola to Ethiopia, trying to outflank the West in the Cold War. But in the 21st century, Russia didn't send divisions, it sent Wagner. Founded in 2014 by Yevgeny Prigozhin, Wagner became Moscow's favorite tool for dirty work abroad. Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, and Africa. By 2017, Wagner was planting boots on the ground in the Central African Republic, Sudan, Libya, and later Mali. The model was brutally simple: guns for gold. They provided military muscle in exchange for lucrative concessions: gold mines, diamond fields, timber, oil. This wasn't just security outsourcing, it was a form of state capture. Wagner trained presidential guards, meddled in elections, and embedded itself so deeply in the African governments that in some places, Moscow had more power than the state itself. But Wagner was also reckless. Between 2017 and 2023, at least 1,800 African civilians were killed by Wagner operatives. Reports of massacres, torture, and even collaborating with rebel groups all but destroyed Russia's claim of being a liberating force. Then came June 2023. Wagner's leader staged a mutiny in Moscow. For Putin, it was unforgivable. Within months, Wagner, as an independent empire, was dismantled. In its place, the Kremlin created the Africa Corps, a new expeditionary force under Russia's Ministry of Defense, overseen by military intelligence, the GRU. By early 2024, Wagner fighters across Africa were told, join the Africa Corps or go home. Many veterans stayed on, but now under the direct control of Moscow. This was a crucial shift. Wagner once gave Russia plausible deniability. Moscow could shrug and say they were just contractors. With the Africa Corps, the fig leaf is gone. Now, every atrocity, every massacre, every political intervention is officially on Russia's tab. Nowhere is this shift clearer than in the Central African Republic. CAR has been ground zero for Russia's Africa adventure. In 2017, Wagner stepped in to rescue the president from rebel forces. By 2021, Wagner fighters had not only beaten back a rebel offensive, they had become indispensable. They guarded the president, they trained the army, and engineered a constitutional referendum to keep him in power. In return, Wagner-linked firms seized control of a gold mine worth over $1 billion. Locals were banned from entering. Revenues flowed to Moscow. And fast forward today, the Kremlin wants to switch the arrangement. Instead of barter, security for mining concessions, it wants cash, billions of CFA francs, cold, hard money to fuel its war in Ukraine. But there's the problem. The CAR can't afford it. Its entire budget is smaller than what Moscow is demanding. And the current president, he still trusts Wagner veterans more than the Africa Corps' bureaucrats. So the CAR is now stuck in a standoff. Moscow wants dollars, but the country wants mercenaries, and rebels are still attacking mines and convoys. The supposed security solution has simply entrenched instability in the country. And the CAR is not alone. In Mali, after the 2021 coup, the junta kicked out French troops and invited Wagner in. Around 1,000 Wagner fighters deployed, but violence actually increased. By 2025, Wagner declared its mission complete and Africa Corps took over. But jihadist attacks have tripled since 2022, raising doubts about Russia's effectiveness. In Sudan, Wagner ran a gold smuggling empire, flying billions in illicit gold to Russia while backing their RSF militia. When Sudan plunged into a civil war in 2023, Wagner reportedly armed one side, opportunism at its finest. In Libya, Wagner backed a warlord Khalifa Haftar with drones, snipers and air defense. Those forces are now under Moscow's direct command. In Mozambique, a rare failure, Wagner sent a small force in 2019 to fight Islamist insurgents and got wiped out. They withdrew within a year, exposing limits to Russia's reach. In all these cases, the patterns are simple. Wagner, and now Africa Corps, offers regime survival, not stability. They guard capitals and mines, but the countrysides burn. So let's follow the money. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, they have extracted at least $2.5 billion worth of African gold, most smuggled through CAR, Sudan and Mali. In the CAR, Wagner's affiliates seized mines and shipped bullion out under falsified manifestos. In Sudan, companies like Mero Gold ran processing plants and smuggled gold on clandestine flights to Moscow. This African gold helps Russia evade Western sanctions and bankroll its war machine. In effect, African resources are funding the war in Ukraine. Now, with Africa Corps, the Kremlin wants tighter control, preferably cash, not just commodities. But here's the catch. Many African governments are broke. They can't afford to pay millions each month for Russian protection, which means Moscow may have to keep looting resources anyway, sanctions or not. So what does Russia actually want to achieve with this? Firstly, it wants to bolster authoritarian regimes, leaders in the Central African Republic, Mali, Burkina Faso. They survive because Moscow keeps them in power. In return, they wave Russian flags, grant Moscow basing rights, and vote with Russia at the UN. Secondly, it creates a new anti-Western bloc in Africa. Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger are turning to Moscow, not Paris or Washington, for protection. But here's the open secret. Russian troops aren't there to protect civilians. They're there to protect the regimes. And when civilians resist, the response is brutal. Massacres, torture, and indiscriminate reprisals. And the results, short-term control, but long-term instability. This brings us to the big picture. The end of Wagner and the rise of Africa Corps marks a new phase in Russia's Africa strategy, from shadow empire to state protector. That makes Russia stronger in one sense. Its interventions are more coordinated with official diplomacy and military planning, but it also makes Moscow more vulnerable. It no longer has deniability. Every failure, every massacre, every rebel offensive now lands squarely on the Kremlin's desk. And the risk is real. Russia is fighting a major war in Ukraine. Its resources are stretched thin. Africa Corps missions cost money, soldiers, and political capital. If the Central African Republic collapses, if Mali's insurgency grows, if Sudan turns against Moscow, Russia could find itself overextended. Meanwhile, other powers are watching. France is plotting a comeback. The US is repositioning in Niger. China is cautious but ready to snap up discounted resources from Russia's African adventures. Even Turkey and the UAE are muscling in. Africa is becoming a proxy battlefield in the multi-popular world. So what? Here are my 3 possible trajectories. Firstly, entrenchment. Africa Corps soldiers solidify their footprint, maybe even establish permanent bases. A long-term Russian sphere of influence, stretching from the Sahel to the Red Sea. Secondly, a quagmire. Russia bleeds resources into endless conflicts, unable to win decisively. Regimes survive, but insurgents thrive. Moscow holds capitals and mines, but the rebels hold the countrysides. Or thirdly, realignment. New coups or elections shift alliances. Russia may be pushed out in some countries, while some re-engage with the West or regional powers. The most likely outcome? A messy stalemate. Russia will keep its grips on fragile regimes and strategic mines, but it won't deliver stability. In fact, its presence will only fuel more violence. And, as long as the war in Ukraine drags on, Moscow will squeeze Africa for every bit of cash and gold they've got. So, the Wagner Group may be gone, but the story of Russian mercenaries in Africa is far from over. With Africa Corps, Moscow has doubled down, trading deniability for control, and gambling Africa's future for its own war in Ukraine. But in the end, the question isn't just about Russia, it's about Africa. Will these countries remain a pawn of global superpowers, or will they find a way to reclaim their sovereignty and wealth? Because one thing is certain, the next battles for influence won't just be fought in Donetsk and Damascus. They'll be fought in the gold mines of the CAR, the deserts of Mali, and the streets of Bakhmut. Thank you for watching, and if you want to keep up with these hidden battlefields shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. See you!